Rewatch Podcast presents the Wilder and Pryor Rewatch.
I don't believe this! Are you kidding?
Join us each week as we discuss the 4 films featuring comedy greats Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
The man's got something to say, let him say it. Up yours!
Silver Streak.
This is fabulous!
Stir Crazy.
Jesus! You could have a mustache!
See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
This is a scandal! What do you mean I'm not white? Why didn't you tell me this before?
And Another You.
You screwed my brain.
Send your feedback to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/rewatchpodcast, and follow us on Twitter @rewatchpod.
Just pick up the phone and call your superiors. Tell them I have the Rembrandt letters.
Today we're discussing See No Evil, Hear No Evil, starring Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, Joan Severance, Kevin Spacey, Alan North, Anthony Zerbe, and Louis Giambalvo, directed by Arthur Hiller. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Cory, and today I threaten to shoot a naked woman with my erection.
Nice. And I'm Nathan. And what are you, fucking deaf?
Yes, I'm fucking deaf. That's
I know.
while I'm talking to you over Skype right now.
I'm just going to go right off the bat. I'm apologising for swearing in my opening line, but as me and Cory were just discussing not a few minutes ago, there's a lot of swearing in this film.
It's a hell of a lot of swearing in this film.
I know, this is Pryor and Wilder just doing the business, and we'll obviously get into it as we kind of discuss it, but how about we have a listen to the trailer, yeah?
Let's do it.
Why do you feel you have to pass for someone with 20/20 vision when you're blind?
I don't feel I have to pay.
Yes, you do. Just like if you were trying to pass for white.
You mean I'm not white?
Oh, sit down.
It feels like it. Ah!
You're blind.
Yes, I'm blind.
I had no idea. I'm sorry. You're really blind?
Yes. What are you, deaf?
Yes, I'm deaf.
How do you know what I'm saying?
Because I'm reading your lips. Wally, there's a gun here.
Don't touch it. Hey! Get rid of it.
The deaf guy, he's not so sure about the woman. And the blind guy, he heard the shot.
The hell is he talking about?
He reads lips. You're talking too fast.
Was there or wasn't there a woman?
Are you serious?
Oh,
Fuzzy Wuzzy was a woman?
Are you with me or not?
no! Oh, Wally! What the?
Go with the flow. Mix in.
You really think you can stop coming?
Not if it's funny. A good comedy, as you call it, is worth its weight in gold. I think we should kill them.
Don't guide me. They're looking for a blind guy and a deaf guy. Stamp your feet. I'll follow the sound.
I feel ridiculous.
You look fine to me. Is that somebody shooting at us?
This guy's blind as a bat. Oh, watch your step. What's the matter with you?
I don't know what you're looking for, but it's a little to the right.
I'm gonna give you the first hit. Now, come on.
Aim for 12 o'clock. Aim for 12. Oh, 11 o'clock.
We should hang out like this more often.
Good night.
What you make
Good night. Forward. Wally, go forward.
How am I doing? We're not up high, are we?
No, we're just a few feet off the ground.
Oh!
It's fun, Wally.
See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Now on video cassette.
All right, welcome back. Should we get straight into the trivia, Cory?
Okay, so See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Our last 2 films were both December releases, but this one came out on May 12th of 1989. So it's been a few years since Wilder and Pryor had teamed up.
It's had a budget of $18 million. The box office for this film in total was actually $46.9 million. I actually did a little bit of research into the other films that were opening around this period when See No Evil, Hear No Evil came out. And as we said, it opened on May 12th. Other films that were in the box office at the time were Field of Dreams, K9, Pet Sematary was number 4 at the box office. Major League with Charlie Sheen and Rain Man. And the thing that I did find interesting is the following week, and this is actually quite funny, it retained the number 1 spot on May 19, but of the big new release that week was Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, which is just crazy.
Yeah,
I know.
Getting drunk and kicking ass. Roadhouse.
See No Evil held the number 1 spot for the second week in a row with $6 million the second week, and Roadhouse had $5.9 million. Now, the third week that it came out on May 26, it actually dropped to number 2 because a little film called Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out and killed the box office. I mean, See No Evil did another $6 million, which is a great pickup for them, but Indiana Jones did $37 million in its opening weekend back on May 26.
That's a comparison.
Well, that's huge business. So it did $46.9 million, but when you transfer that to today's money, it's probably hovering around the 150 million kind of mark. It was a big success, wasn't it?
It was, but as we talked about last week, the most successful film between the 4 that these two did together, Stir Crazy, got over the $100 million mark. This is less than half that amount, which is very surprising. And I guess it just goes to show, this is 9 years. 9 years have passed since they teamed up to do Stir Crazy. So 9 years later, they're doing less than the $100 million that they did previously.
I think there was meant to be there was quite a few attempts to kind of get them back together, and for whatever reason it just didn't work out. I know that Sidney Poitier followed up Stir Crazy with a film called Hanky Panky, and Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner actually starred in that film, but apparently Richard Pryor was meant to reteam, but for whatever reason dropped out at the 11th hour, and I think his role was rewritten as a woman and recast as Gilda Radner, who was Gene Wilder's wife at the time.
So, of course, this movie, the title is derived from the Three Wise Monkeys proverb, which is see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. But the third section of the phrase, speak no evil, was dropped from this title. And of the 2 lead characters, one being deaf, one being blind, that's the setup for this situation. Of course, they can both still speak to each other. So it was actually decided early that they wouldn't have a third character who would naturally have to be either dumb or mute. And I think that would take a lot more for a character comedian to be able to convey a non-speaking role. Now, we know that actors have been able to pull that off. I mean, only a few years after this, a little independent film came out called Clerks, and everybody latched onto the Silent Bob character, the character who doesn't speak at all.
Well, he speaks a bit, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, it's like one line at the end.
And it's always really memorable.
Yeah.
So,
but, you don't need 3 people for this.
No, you don't.
You got Wilder and Pryor together, deaf and blind. That's a funny team up. That's a funny situation to be in, and the 2 of them can play off each other that way.
And there's so many good gags with these kind of guys throughout this film. I mean, obviously, we'll kind of get more into it as we talk about it, but there's a lot of great stuff in here. So anyway, so Gene Wilder actually went to the New York League for the hard of hearing to actually study for his role. There he was actually assigned to a speech pathologist, Karen Webb, who would actually ultimately become his 4th wife. So there you go. I mean, I think he was with Gilda Radner to her death, and then I think this woman, Karen Webb, probably they got married after, so I'm not too sure exactly when. So yeah.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Richard Pryor actually went over to the Braille Institute in Los Angeles, where he was taught what they call the cane technique, which is the correct way for a blind person to use a cane. And he visited classrooms and observed mannerisms and stuff. So the 2 of them really went method in their roles here. They really wanted to do justice, not just to be slapsticky or anything like that, but they wanted to, be respectful towards deaf and blind people.
In saying that, though, after a screening of the film, the upper management from the Braille Institute actually disavowed any connection to the film.
I love this.
Turning down the offers of proceeds from the opening night, which instead went to another non-profit providing services to young blind people. The Institute administrator objected to the film's language. And I was actually a bit shocked. I don't remember. I've seen this film, honestly, Corey, at least half a dozen times since it came out. This is one of those films I kind of grew up with, in the background. I've certainly seen it quite a bit. I haven't watched it for at least 10 years for me personally. So it was actually really refreshing visiting it. But I don't remember there being so much language. Like maybe when I was younger, it just didn't have as much of an effect on me. But now that I'm kind of, got kids and family and all that kind of stuff, maybe it just I just heard it a little bit more, yeah? It's possible.
I mean, this is a solid R rating for a comedy film, and the language has to be a big part of that. But that's what I love about this trivia. It wasn't that they were like, how dare you make fun of blind people? We don't want your money. No, it's this film has very foul language, and our Institute for the Blind does not want your money from this profanity.
Do you think they're being offensive, like in terms of like blind people, deaf, all that kind of stuff? Like I personally don't think they are. I think they're actually playing the roles with much love towards the disabilities of deaf and blind people. Like they're not making fun of them at all, I don't think.
No. I think the performance is very much about just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't do things, That's what it's about. And the two characters are very much like that all the time. Just because I'm blind doesn't mean I can't work at your shop, or don't do me any favors because I'm blind, or all that stuff.
That's exactly, because at no point throughout the film do they want people to have pity on them because of their disability, do they? I mean,
exactly.
It's just part of them, and it's like you just have to accept it, and that's it, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. It's the independence of it all.
Now, Gene Wilder almost wasn't in this movie. According to his autobiography, he actually turned the script down twice due to its treatment of the deaf and blind, which we were just talking about. But he intended to do the same when offered it a third time. But apparently his agent actually talked him into meeting with a studio, which was called TriStar. And the TriStar people asked Gene himself to rewrite the script for him and Richard Pryor, which he agreed to do. And the rest is history. And I'm really glad he did do it, because his comedic timing in this film is spot on. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's funny. He does have a writing credit in the opening credits, if you watch, along with 4 other people. There was a lot of people writing on this movie.
As you mentioned in the opening introduction, there is one Kevin Spacey in this film, House of Cards himself. The Usual Suspects, and you name it, all those kind of great roles. And this is one of his very early major roles, yeah?
Yeah, and honestly, it wasn't until I revisited this movie years later where I was like, I don't remember Kevin Spacey being in this. You know why? Because who was Kevin Spacey in 1989? This is his first role, his first big role, at least.
Yeah. Well, he was in Wise Guy in 1988, and I think there was some talk about the reason why he was kind of cast is because of his chemistry with the other actress, Joan Severance, who apparently was also in Wise Guy as well. Now, she's one of those actresses that I've seen 50 times, but I never quite knew what her name was, if you know what I mean. I'm sure you're probably the same.
Oh, yeah.
She's one of those kind of 80s it girls. And she certainly plays it up here, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah. I remember her for something else, but we'll talk about that when we get into the movie. It's a very specific point of this movie. I'll leave that up to your imagination what part it is.
Nice.
But anyway, speaking of Kevin Spacey in this film, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on Kevin Spacey in this movie because he has a very distinctive bump on his left cheek throughout this film.
It's funny you mention that, because when I was watching it today, or whenever it was, I kept looking at it going, what on earth is that?
When I revisited this years later, I used to think, there must have been some sort of subplot where he got punched in the face or something, and there's a reason, the makeup department put this lump on his face. So today, before we started recording, I Googled, see no evil, hear no evil, Kevin Spacey, lump on his face.
Nice. Nice Google search, right?
And I actually came across this website, chasingspacey.tumblr.com.
Okay.
They dedicated a whole paragraph to Kevin Spacey's face.
Oh my God.
So, if you'll indulge me for a second, I'll read you this little paragraph.
By all means.
After his expressive eyes, his most distinctive facial feature, the inch-long groove Spacey sports down the right side of his kisser, is not a scar at all, but a skin wrinkle, a genetic characteristic of the Fowler family. Father Jeff had them also. This has not stopped Kevin playfully claiming that he received it in a duel, quote-unquote. Perhaps he was thinking of the fencing pictures that brother Randy took in 1976. Spacey does have at least 3 genuine scars, however. The crease above the lid of his left eye is the legacy of a childhood altercation with a cat named Prince Albert.
Oh my God.
While the dimple on his left cheek results from a cyst that was removed by surgery in the late 80s after it grew to painful proportions. In See No Evil, Hear No Evil, 1989, it is particularly prominent.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
He also bears a small V-shaped furrow above one eyebrow, the mark left by a cardboard coat hanger cover thrown at him by Randy during a spat between the siblings in 1968. There you go.
There you do go. Wow, that's cool. I would never have kind of guessed that. It did perplex me. I wasn't quite sure because I was with you. I kind of thought maybe it was like a makeup thing or some kind of accident, but I couldn't quite work out why it was kind of there because I certainly don't remember. And I've seen my fair share of Kevin Spacey films, as I'm sure you have as well, him having that kind of mark on his thing. So in this film, that problem that he had on his cheek was more pronounced, and he obviously got it dealt with after the film was completed, yeah?
Exactly.
Well, there you go.
Very bizarre, but thank you, chasingspacey.tumblr.com.
No worries. Look it up. Perfect. All right. Are we at our main discussion, Corey?
Yes. See no evil, hear no evil. As we were saying, a great setup for this. Deaf and blind guy. And we start off with our introduction to Gene Wilder's character, David Lyons. And we're setting up the fact that he is deaf. And he owns a little shop in the lobby of a hotel. And he's confronted by, the doorman or the maitre d' or someone who tries to speak to him like he's a child.
Before we kind of get to the doorman speaking to him like he's a child, there's that really great sequence right at the start of the film where Gene Wilder's kind of walking along the street and he's being honked at, and there's all he's getting abused left, right, and center, with all this truckers driving by, abusing him terribly. And then he kind of walks along and this car kind of abuses him absolutely woefully. And he actually turns around and he confronts the motorist and he sort of says, screw you, man. And he starts yelling at the top of his lungs. And blind Richard Pryor walks by. Now, keep in mind, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder do not know each other at this stage. They're total strangers. And because Richard Pryor is blind and he all he hears is Gene Wilder yelling, screw you, man, or something like that, Richard Pryor confronts him, in the subway. And it's very funny. It starts off the movie, really, really, it introduces the two main characters really kind of quickly. And you kind of get an idea of where they're kind of at. And you have this great sequence where Richard Pryor is convinced he's being abused by Dave Lyons, who's Gene Wilder's character. And he starts throwing punches. I mean, don't we meet Richard Pryor's sister and all that kind of stuff at that time too?
That's right. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
It is because, of course, when Wally turns around and he's just like, "Hey, you talking to me, asshole?" Dave Lyons, he can't hear him to know that this guy thinks that he's being insulted by him. He's just yelling at a motorist. And it is. It's a good setup for the back and forth that they're going to have throughout this film.
After we kind of have this really great opening scene between Pryor and Wilder, we cut to the concession shop, which is some kind of news stand. The maitre d' or the manager or whoever he is trying to explain to Dave Lyons that there's going to be some kind of fire warden or something like that doing the rounds of the building. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's just setting up about how these two men, yes, they're disabled, deaf and blind respectively, but they have this independence about them. And he kind of, because this manager guy is speaking to him in such broken English, in a way, he's just speaking to him like a baby. He's like, there's this nasty rumor going around that I'm deaf. And I really don't appreciate it. And the guy's going on about, I feel like such an idiot. And just while he's talking about how much of an idiot he feels like, Gene Wilder looks away for a moment, comes back up and says, especially on Thursdays, to the guy, and walks off.
We then cut back after we have this kind of setup of him owning the concession stand. We then cut back to Pryor and his sister, and he needs to get to some kind of job interview or something like that. And that's where Wally's kind of going to. And we kind of get the impression, and without being too mean and nasty, Pryor, he's stubborn, isn't he? He's a stubborn blind man.
Very stubborn.
He doesn't want any help from anyone. He insists that he can do everything by himself, and without being too mean or nasty, because I know he tries, he kind of can't, and he needs help just a bit anyway. You know,
exactly. They set up, through the dialogue he has with his sister, that he lost a job recently because the guy treated him like he was blind.
That's right. And he gets out of the car from his sister before he goes to see Dave Lyons. And there's that great scene where he's walking along the street because the sister goes, okay, I'll meet you back here. Just wait for the beeps. And he gets out of the car and he's walking through the crowd to go to the concession stand. And he meets another blind man who actually politely asks him, can you help me to cross the road or something like that? Wally being super stubborn and kind of not even for a moment saying, maybe I can't do this, says, sure, no problem at all. And he leads him across the road and they end up on the back of like one of those elevators on a truck. There's this great gag where the thing kind of goes up and of course Wally walks off the end and falls on his face. You know what I mean? It's quite funny.
And then they get officially introduced to each other, which is absolutely hilarious. Because he walks up and, of course, he's pretending he's not blind. And Dave's like, who are you looking at? Because he can't look him in the eyes. He doesn't know where his eyes are to look him in the eyes. And he's like, oh, my contact lenses or something like that. And then he knocks a whole bunch of stuff over. So Dave has to, pick it all up. And while he's picking it all up, Wally starts talking about getting a job and can I get paid $300 a week or something like that?
$300 a week, $250.
So when Dave finally comes back up and can see his face, read his lips, he has no idea what the guy's talking about, and the two of them kind of get heated backwards and forwards about what it is they're actually talking about.
Can I help you with something?
Oh, yes, I'm here about the ad in the paper. Salesman wanted, must have sense of humor. Are you the owner of the shop, sir?
Who are you talking to?
Oh, there you are. Damn, look at there. Contacts again. You see that? Oh. See, I'm looking for Mr. David Lyons.
I'm David Lyons.
Pleased to meet you, David. Oh, I'm sorry. I read your ad in the paper about the Ivy League type, tall, dark, handsome. 3 out of 4 ain't bad, right? As you can see, I'm kind of nervous. Really want the job. But I am a damn good salesman.
I'm David Lyons. What can I do for you?
Uh-oh. Ooh, what are we caught in a time warp here or something? Twilight Zone, maybe? Doo-doo-doo-doo. Any Martians here want to speak to Mr. David Lyons? Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. You're a funny guy. And I really like that ad you put in the paper. Must have a sense of humor. Not many people would do that, but you did. I'm your guy. If you want me, here I am.
Would you tell me what you want?
$350.
What are you talking about?
$300, but that's it.
Are you talking to me?
$225. Listen, man, $225 a week. All right, $200. I can't live on less than that.
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to you, you prick. What do you say?
Why don't you look me in the eye and say that?
I would if I could, but I can't. I'm blind.
You're blind?
Yes, I'm blind. How can I have the job?
I had no idea. I'm sorry.
Now you know. Can I get the job?
You're really blind?
Yes, I'm really blind, man. What are you, fucking deaf?
Yes, I'm fucking deaf.
You're deaf?
Yes, I'm deaf.
You really deaf?
I'm really deaf.
How do you know what I'm saying?
Because I'm reading your lips. Now, do you want the job or don't you?
Because I'm blind? Hey, shove it up your ass, pal. I don't want no favors from no deaf ass.
Then go home. Get out of here. Give me some peace of mind. To hell with blind people. Just turn around and walk out.
That's better. Now, I believe we agreed on $300.
300 what? What are we talking about?
Just a minute. Hold everything. Stop the music. Do you like Harvey Wallbangers?
Harvey who?
Wallbangers, a friend of mine. I'll introduce you to it later. Because tonight, my friend, we celebrate.
It's a really good conceit the concept of, a blind man and a deaf man having to work together, because there's a lot of great gags in this film. Like, that it kind of reminded me of like a Abbott and Costello in some kind of ways, like in terms of the straight man and the funny man, and they have these misunderstandings. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what they're going for here, because the two of them, because of this incident and the heated discussion that they got into, they actually kind of become like pretty good friends. And you quickly learn that Wally is kind of, as he would put it, he's the fuck it kind of guy.
He's the fuck it guy.
He uses a lot of foul language, and he doesn't care what people think, because you know what? He can't see them, so he doesn't know if they're staring at him or not. He doesn't. So he just decided, I'm not going to give a shit. And Wally is kind of the reverse of that. He kind of steers clear of people. He got divorced. He says that he only went fully deaf about 8 years ago.
He was an actor. I think he says he was an actor, and he said he was trying to like give people the illusion that he hadn't lost his hearing, and for whatever reason it kind of caught up with him, and his career was over. He didn't really sound too disappointed. He just kind of accepted his fate, yeah?
But he's not the fuck it kind of guy.
No, not at all.
And it takes Wally to sort of guide him into that, because he says, I can see people looking at me. People treat me differently because I'm deaf. And he immediately puts an ice cream cone smack down on his head and says, you look kind of foolish to me.
So before Wally and Dave even meet, it's also established pretty early that Wally, he has like a gambling problem, and there's a scene of him at a bookies and he puts his last $50 on some horse that of course doesn't win, right? So he's deep in debt to some bookie, and that plays a segue in their fate kind of thing. So to cut a long story short, Wally is working at Dave's concession stand, and one morning as Wally actually waits outside for the day's newspapers, a man actually walks into Dave's shop looking for Wally, and it looks like it's Wally's bookie.
Yeah, I think he pretty much says, he's looking for Wally, he owes him some money. But then he's quickly distracted by this extremely long-legged woman walking in, and he suddenly starts to panic about this woman, and this is during Severance, of course. So he asks Dave to read a antacid container of some kind. So he's up there reading the back of this medicine, and the woman proceeds to murder him right there, shoots him. And of course, Dave doesn't know this has happened because he can't hear the gunshot going off.
So he continues reading.
He just keeps reading throughout this whole murder happening right behind him.
Talking about antacid pills. And also keep in mind that the bookie who's looking for Wally, once he saw the beautiful woman, Joan, or Eve her name is, he quickly removes a gold coin from his suitcase and places it in the cigar box that is like a tip jar sitting on the counter. And this obviously plays like a big part in the story, yeah?
Yeah, what's the MacGuffin? It's the reason the murder happened. And then, of course, Wally, he was outside. He heard the gunshot, but he couldn't see the woman. And Dave didn't hear the gunshot, so he also didn't turn around to see who shot this bookie as well. So between the two of them, they didn't see anything, and all he heard was a gunshot.
But importantly, Dave did notice the legs that walked away from him as she left the shop. So he's kind of going, well, somebody was here, and I clearly didn't do this murder. You also got this gag too where Wally walks out from the street and he obviously can't see what's happening, and doesn't he trip over the body and he falls over and goes, like, what's going on? And then Dave walks around and then finds the gun and actually brings it over to Wally and says, Wally, somebody shot this man and this is the gun. And Wally's like, what are you doing? Like, put the gun down. Don't touch it. And then obviously, as this is happening, the police show up. They are pretty keen to arrest who they think did this kind of terrible murder. And the only people that they can see did this is Wally and Dave. So the next thing we know, they get shifted off to the police station pretty quickly. But before, and this is important too, before they get going to the police station, Dave actually tells Wally, make sure you collect the coins from the cigar box. I don't quite know why he tells him to do that at that exact moment.
I don't know. Just a reason to get that coin into Wally's pocket.
That's exactly right. So Eve and Kevin Spacey can't find it for whatever reason. So we now find ourselves at the police station. Dave and Wally actually being interrogated by, I actually think, Captain Braddock. I thought he was a great character in this film. He really plays, I think we've spoken about this a little in the past about like the idea of the lieutenant of the police unit whose blood pressure just goes through the roof all the time. Like this guy plays that role really well, yeah, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny because they are being interrogated, and the guy comes out, like the police officer, and he says to Captain Braddock, like, oh, you know, there's one of them's deaf and one of them's blind. And he goes, what is this? Some sort of joke? I'll go in there and I'll sort this
Doesn't
mess
he
out.
like accuse the guy of being too soft? It's like, you're too soft.
Yeah.
You know, you'll believe anything, you know. These are the guys, you know. And doesn't he say something about like the commissioner is like running up my ass or something like that? I've got that, and it's just all these like really like stereotypical kind of lines about like, you know, what the cops kind of do and just all those kind of things that kind of happen in the background. It's very funny.
Exactly. From the second he walks into that interrogation room, he's just like, was there or wasn't there a woman? And it's just silent. Was there or wasn't there a woman? And Wally's like, oh, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Yes, I was talking to you, asshole. I didn't see anything.
I'm blind.
And then, of course, he tries to talk to Dave about it. And he starts off by speaking too fast, so he can't read his lips. So he goes really slow. So Dave's like, yes, there was a woman. Why is he talking like that? Because he's deaf, not stupid.
That's right. So we've got, you know, the detectives who immediately take a dislike to them, and he immediately makes them his prime suspects due to the uselessness of them as kind of witnesses. I mean, he's got no one else, and you can't really blame him. At the end of the day, the cops walked in, they're holding the gun over the body of the murderer. You like put two and two together, they're going to blame him. So they're kind of going off this secondhand information of who is this woman and why on earth would she be there. There was clearly somebody else there. So we then shift back to our beautiful woman, Severance and Spacey, Eve and her accomplice, Kurgo, his actual name is, and they're hoping to recover the coin. So they actually arrive to bail them out by posing instantly as their attorneys. And Wally recognizes something about them, like he smells Eve's perfume, and doesn't he actually say to them, like, have we met before? And he actually puts two and two together and tries and make that kind of connection. And Dave also recognizes her legs as well. And the thing I do find interesting, and we kind of go back to Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, like I kind of forgot how much of a womanizer Wilder, like he's a ladies man. Like even in this film, he's making eyes at Severance, and he's like planning their future, like in his mind. You know what I mean?
Immediately, he's just talking about what a striking woman she is. Oh, you know, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He's a big womanizer, and of course, the fact that he didn't see her face in the first place was because he was too busy looking at her legs. That's just it, though. Wally recognizes the perfume. He recognizes the legs. There we go, two and two together. She's the killer. She's not our lawyer.
That's exactly it. But Braddock ignores them when they insist that she is the killer. He just ignores them, just goes, you guys are the guys. And then after they leave and they go into holding or something like that, is that the scene where they go and get the mugshot taken, or does that happen later in the film? I can't remember.
No, it happens around this time anyway, but yeah.
I thought that was a great gag. It really made me laugh, of the woman that was trying to take a picture of Wilder for his mugshot. She kept sort of saying, like, behind the camera, and like obviously Wilder can't read lips, like unless he's kind of seeing them, he can't hear anything. So she's actually talking to Richard Pryor and sort of saying, can you tell Wilder to kind of sit still? So like Pryor would have to tap Wilder on the shoulder. Wilder would turn his head. Pryor would say, you need to sit still, and his head would stay to the right, and she'd get really, really frustrated. And this kind of went on and on for about 3 or 4 times. And there's this one moment where Wilder actually turns his head to Pryor, and Pryor says to Wilder, you need to sit still, like she's getting cranky now. And he actually says, I'm losing my patience with this woman.
She finally snaps it as he turns his head back to say, I'm losing my patience. Just shit. Yeah, she just cannot get a profile photo for her.
That's exactly right. And doesn't she say something like, I'll get you when you are sleeping, or something like that, you know? So we then find Dave and Wally. I think they're in a lift with the Captain Braddock and the detective, who's always telling Captain Braddock to calm down. He's going, "Calm down, sir. Like, don't panic. We can get them. It's fine. Like, it's okay. We'll get our guy." You know. Somehow they pull off. I think they get to a level and they push them out the lift or something like that, or they close the doors behind them really quickly, and they somehow make their escape. Now, keep in mind too that Dave's hands are handcuffed, but Wally's are not, because doesn't Wally talk the detective into uncuffing him because he's blind?
Yeah, exactly. At one point he walks into a wall and Dave's just like, "Do you have to handcuff him? He's blind, for Christ's sake. I mean, come on." So Wally's got his hands free, but Dave has to walk around with his hands behind his back.
We then get this gag where they escape the police's custody, and just as they're escaping, for whatever reason, there's like a protest of some description.
It's like a free Iran protest or something.
I know. It's like a free Iran protest, and Dave says to, or Wally says to Dave, just, blend in, blend in, blend in. So they blend in, they exit the police station, and they get interviewed by like a TV station or something like that at the front, and like they're talking to Dave, the blind man, the deaf guy who clearly can't hear what the TV reporter's saying, and he's totally just talking nonsense, isn't he?
Yeah, she asks about someone named Comey, and he thinks she says comedy, and he's just like, yeah, so it's like, good comedy is always fun. And
that's right.
He's like, what? Very random.
Wally says to Dave, "Don't you think it would be better if you don't lead me around? Like, we're meant to be like incognito." Like,
yeah, they're looking for a deaf and blind guy.
Yeah, we're looking for a deaf and blind guy. So they do this gag where he does like this stomping kind of thing, because that's the only way he can let Wally know like where he is. It's during this period that we meet up again with Eve and Kurgo. They confront Wally and David during this period, don't they?
Yeah, so they naturally get their hands on the coin because it's in Wally's pocket, and they call their boss to find out like what they should do with these two, and it turns out that they're witnesses and stuff like that.
Get rid of them.
Yeah, she's on the phone, but Dave can read lips, so he sort of gets a gist of what she's saying. She says something about Great Gorge. He thinks she says Grace George.
Something like that.
So that's going to come back later. But yeah, he kind of gets a gist of what's going on with them. And it's decided that the two of them, even though they're deaf and blind, they are still witnesses and they know these people. They've seen them around. So they're going to have to kill them. And she takes off with the car to meet Kurgo after he murders them. And during that period, they manage to knock him out.
Yeah, using the fist fighting method that we didn't really talk about this. There's a scene earlier on, like right at the start of the film, after it's established that Wally and Dave are mates, and they go to a bar and they get into a fight.
So he has to use like it's 1 o'clock, so he knows.
Yeah, 1 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, all that kind of stuff, And they use this method and they actually knock Kurgo out, and they then steal a unattended police car and actually drive away with Eve, Kurgo, and Braddock chasing them. Now, also keep in mind too that Pryor is the one that's driving, because Wilder still has his hands behind his back, handcuffed, and it's this great sequence actually where they're just like, obviously Pryor can't see what he's doing, and Wilder is panicking, isn't he? Totally panicking when he's giving instructions to Pryor, like he's in fear for his life, where he's saying like hard right, hard left, you're driving on the curb, and doing all this kind of stuff. It's
Turn it left, cows. They end up in like a meat warehouse or something.
Cows, for God's sake, it's crazy.
But yeah, and of course, while this is going on, so they're being chased by the cops, they're being chased by Eve in her, I think they call it a Spider later on. It's an 80s sports car. Sports car. So it's their car. It's very distinctive. But they actually end up driving off a dock and into a garbage barge on its way to New Jersey.
Then doesn't he say something like, "Oh, great, we're going to New Jersey. I got family there." And then Wilder says, "That's wonderful for you." Like he says this really straight line, and it's just comedy gold. It's great.
They actually have this like moment where you can tell he's like trying to hold in his frustration, because he's like, since I've met you, my life has been so much simpler, and you're such a good friend, but I'm just holding back my frustration because I need to get over The stench of 7 million tons of garbage.
Where are we?
I think we're floating towards New Jersey.
No shit. I got relatives in Jersey.
How nice for you.
You could read her lips, right?
Yes, I could.
What did she say?
She said, I'll give it to you tomorrow. We'll go to Grace George in the morning and wait for your call. And then she said, we have to leave the country tomorrow.
Okay. Now we have to find this Grace George lady and wait for him to show up. Are you with me?
Am I with you? Of course. You've earned my trust, Wally. You're always watching out for me. You never get me into trouble. Sometimes life is a little boring with you. But that's a small price to pay for such a wonderful friendship.
That's a sweet thing you just said. Do you mean everything you just said?
I'll tell you exactly how I feel in just a minute or two. Right now, I'm a little overwhelmed by the stink of the 7,000 tons of garbage that you drove me into.
Is that what it is? I thought you let one go. That's why I didn't say nothing.
That was kind of you. Thank you.
I think Wilder is hilarious when he yells. He's got this great tone to his yelling that is kind of this weird kind of pitch that he hits that's very funny. Like, it's great.
He does do his panic squeal again in this movie. That what?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I did think before we started chatting that I wanted to bring that up at some point because you're right. He does it once. I think he does it once when he's getting dragged away to the cells with the cops. He starts panicking.
That weird thing about mens rea. It's a legal term meaning like intent or something like that, and he thinks it's some sort of STD or something. I want a blood test. What?
They've hid the police car somehow, and the two men actually are able to walk to a motel. And before they know it, they telephone Wally's sister, whose name is Adele, for help. So meanwhile, Wally and Dave, they're the most wanted people in all of the city. They're like on the front page of the paper. They're on the news. The whole city's looking for them. So they've got to hide really, really hard. So somehow the police follow Adele. So they must have been watching her. And they actually end up searching her motel room. But they don't really do that good a search. They kind of walk in. It looks like Dave and Wally, they're hiding in the vents.
It's like they opened the bathroom window or something to make it look like they crawled out the back. But they've hidden up in the vents for and the cops just don't do a good search, and I guess they just leave. But yeah, this is, where they can lay out what Dave could tell Eve was saying on the phone when he was reading her lips. And that's when he brings up Grace George, and Adele says, do you mean Great Gorge? It's like a big, I guess some sort of like community, and there's a big hotel up there or something. So it seems more likely that's what they were talking about. So they've kind of put that together. They can head to Great Gorge.
And again, we're coming back to the deaf and blind gags in a big way. I think this whole sequence is great. I loved all the stuff at the hotel. When they finally kind of get there, the whole conceit is that they have to impersonate or somehow get a room at the hotel. And you have this scene where the clerk behind the desk is talking to a different customer who's trying to get a room, and she says, I shouldn't do this, but we've got these 3 or 4 people that are meant to be here, and if they don't check in by a certain time, then I'll let their rooms go. So why don't you just hang around, and if they don't come here, then you can get a room. So anyway, so the guy goes off to the bar and has a drink, and they see this as an opportunity to kind of maybe get a room somehow. So Adele actually goes to the clerk, poses as a blind woman, says, can you show me where the bathroom is? So the clerk shows the woman where the bathroom is. Meanwhile, Wally and Dave swoop in, have a look at this little thing, find 2 names of people that are meant to check in, and they essentially impersonate them.
But the thing is that Wally has to be a Swedish doctor.
I know.
And Wilder has to be German. As soon as she comes back, Wally, he's doing that thing again where he's pretending he's not blind, so he doesn't know which way to look.
That's
and
right.
He's just like, I'm from Sweden. Yes, I'm from Sweden, and you're at Speedy. It's just terrible.
Terrible accent, but I'm not an expert on Richard Pryor. I'm really not. Like, I've listened to some of his comedy. I've seen a few of his films. Absolutely. But he's great. I think he's great in this film. I think he's far better in this film against Wilder than he was in Stir Crazy. I think he really holds his own. Big time.
He actually has a great gag in this whole thing where the woman behind the counter says, "Oh, we're all out of singles, but we've got 2 queens." And he quickly looks up at her and goes, "Well, get those guys out of there. We want to get some sleep."
That's hilarious.
Such a good gag. Just
I
like
know.
it was like no beat necessary. Just
Yeah.
off the bat with his comeback to that.
So we've got Wally impersonating the visiting professor. I think his name is Professor Johansson, if I remember rightly. And I can't recall what Wilder's impersonation was, but you're right, he's like a German doctor of some description, yeah?
Yeah.
Turns out that Dr. Johansson has to give some kind of speech. Now, at this stage, we don't quite understand what kind of conference it is. As Pryor goes to the conference to give his keynote address or whatever it is, it turns out that he's like some kind of sex.
He's a gynecologist.
He's a guy, that's right. And he's got to give some keynote address on, apparently he wrote some paper on sexual positions for the elderly or something like that.
Oh man, it is too funny as well, because this guy gets up and he asks a question about like what activities do they do to stay spry or something like that.
They go bicycling. Sometimes they just like to go fucking or something like that.
Oh man, it's good.
It is good. And then he feigns some kind of like heart attack or some kind of like he's sick or something.
Before we get to that, the reason he actually got dragged away to do the speech was because they find out what room Eve and Kurgo were in. So Dave's going to go in there and find the coin while Adele's outside distracting Kurgo, runs into his car and she makes a big hoo-ha about it. So Dave goes into the room to get the coin, and luckily enough, Eve is in the shower, so she can't see what's going on. And that's when he gets dragged off to do the speech.
Adele is in the mix as well. Like, she's helping Wally and Dave out. She actually crashes her car into Kurgo and Eve's car, so Kurgo has to leave the room. And it's actually a pretty good sequence, actually, that scene between Spacey and Adele. And that's the scene where you see Kurgo's mark on his cheek, like, quite profoundly. Adele is like, she's all panicked. She's like, "Oh, my Lord, my husband's, he's going to kill me. What is he going to say? And he's an insurance guy. We have to exchange details." And Kurgo's like, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's just an accident. We can, it's fine." And she really insists on making it really, really complicated. It's actually quite funny.
It is a good back and forth. And we get this whole scene in the hotel room. And now, as I mentioned before, there was a reason why I remember Joan Severance. And it's because of this scene. I am pretty sure this is the first time I saw a pair of boobs.
Oh, wow. There you go.
It was this movie.
Wow. And there's a few boobs in this film too, actually. It's funny you mention that because there's a scene earlier on with Eve and Kurgo right at the start of the film where they're just talking by themselves in a hotel room. And for no reason whatsoever, Eve takes her shirt off and she's just like in some kind of like bra. And it's like, what do you like? Do you remember it? And I remember thinking, why do you have your shirt off now?
No reason.
For no reason whatsoever. And you can't see her boobs, but you can see through her top. It's like, what's going on there? Well, that's hilarious, Corey. So this is your first kind of, a pair of boobs. Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I'll always love Joan Severance for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're out there listening, Joan, thank you so much.
You know what, though? Like, all jokes aside, Dave's character is a bit of a peeping Tom in this scene. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. Because at least it has something to do with the story, her nakedness, if you will. Because, yeah, she's in the shower, Kurgo's outside, so, yeah, he kind of has this moment where he can look around for the coin, and he sees a bag in the bathroom, and she opens the door and everything, and he thinks he's been found out, but she's got some stuff on her face, and he has to like maneuver the bag around so she can grab at it, and all this back and forth, and he finally gets the bag out, but because he's deaf, He doesn't hear that she's actually turned the shower off and she's coming out.
He's really clumsy as well. Like, he's making noise and things are falling on the floor and stuff. It's like, man, just be quiet, dude. Seriously.
But he gets the coin. She comes out of the shower. He suddenly realizes that she's there. And he puts his hand in his pocket to make it look like he has a gun. Right. And he's holding a gun on her. Has her put up both hands so she has to drop the towel that she's wrapped around her as well.
Makes her do it as well. And he knows exactly what he's doing.
Exactly. And she's there and she's got her hands up and he's backing away to the door and he does this whole goodbye my love bit and everything like that.
Maybe another time kind of thing or something like that, yeah.
But as soon as he gets to the door, he actually takes his hand out of his pocket and you realize that his pants are still poking forward. From where it looked like he had a gun.
Nice.
I thought that was such a great gag. He's just got this massive erection.
It is a good gag. It is verging on slightly creepy.
A little bit.
But it's very funny.
It's a very 1980s kind of gag.
So we've got Dave and Wally. They get away. I think Dave actually goes to retrieve Johansson from the conference. And again, we've got this great gag where he's kind of panicking, like, because he desperately doesn't want to kind of be there and he can't give the speech and he can't answer the question. So he feigns some kind of like attack of some description.
He calls it like hysterical blindness. Like he's suddenly been struck blind because of hysteria. So we have to leave now.
That's exactly right. And then Wild's character kind of gets in and they do this like great gag where he like holds up like one finger or something like this. How many fingers am I holding up? And Pryor says 3.
That's not bad considering he's blind.
That's exactly right. It's not bad considering he's blind. Exactly. And then he says, "What?" And he says, "What's the first thing that pops into your head?" And he yells out, "Pussy!" Or something. It's so good. Anyway, so whilst this is all happening, Eve and Kurgo discover that Adele is Wally's sister and they actually kidnap Adele and actually take her back to their boss's estate, which is Sutherland's estate. So after a tragic mishap with the car, Dave and Wally actually put their rescue plan into action with the result that Adele actually escapes, but the two men are actually captured. And it's actually quite funny where they get tipped off by the bellboy that it's like this place down the road if you go here kind of thing or something like that. Is that right?
Exactly. So they go over there. They see Adele in the greenhouse in the backyard, but we quickly learn, because Eve and Kurgo are talking with Sutherland, that they've intentionally put her out there. You know, it's open. There's nobody else around, so the two of them should be able to come and try to rescue her, and at that point we can capture them. And that's exactly what happens.
They end up getting into the place. They get around the dogs. They get to Adele and free her. I think she goes to call the police like immediately. That's her job, yeah?
It's actually a good gag because, of course, Wally can't scale the wall and break in. So Dave goes over. He can't open the greenhouse door. Adele's there and she's gagged and she's trying to yell something at him. And he breaks open the glass to open the door, but he can't hear the alarm going off. So he's sneaking in and he's like, "Don't worry, it'll be all right." But this alarm's just blaring away. He's got no idea.
So we've got our Eve and Kurgo. They're in the study talking to Sutherland, and it's actually revealed fairly quickly that the coin isn't actually a coin. It's actually a room temperature superconductor. It's something to do with electricity and being able to like power like a whole city, like this small thing. And it's extremely valuable. And this kind of pisses off Kurgo pretty quickly because he immediately starts to like renegotiate their contract somehow, yeah. And he sort of says, you know, "I think I'm worth more than this." And he goes, "Well, okay, we'll have a third of like $8 million or something like that." And Kurgo goes, "Fantastic, this is great." And then out of nowhere, the lights go off and Sutherland, who reveals himself to be a bit of a badass, shoots Kurgo, doesn't he? And kills him like immediately, yeah.
And the big plot twist is that Sutherland was able to do this because he himself is also blind.
Yes.
So when he flicked the lights off, he had the advantage. He knew exactly where in the room Kurgo was, and he was able to shoot him dead. So they have this kind of extended sequence where both Wally and Sutherland are walking around the room.
These two blind people having a gunfight. It's hilarious, actually. When I was watching it, I was going, are they serious? Like, it was very funny the way it was kind of done, and I totally believed it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it was good because they're both sneaking around and they quietly sneak past each other, and then they both turn at the exact same time because they think they hear something. And yeah, it's a well-staged scene.
Dave and Wally, they actually escape the study, and they actually have a altercation with Eve, who's actually running away to a helicopter that is kind of waiting for her to kind of get away.
Because Eve shows up with Dave and she kills Sutherland.
Yes, that's right. So Eve is running away. You've got Lyons and Wally. They realise they can't catch up to Eve very, very quickly. So they see this kind of zip line from the top of the building down to the helicopter. They think it's a good idea to get Wally's jacket, hold it over the zip line. And I think Wally holds on to David's waist and they zip line down. And then as they're going past the helicopter pilot and Eve, they then drop themselves like bombs on these people and they fall on top of them. Meanwhile, the police show up. So Eve is arrested very, very quickly as soon as the police show up. But they do this really good gag right at the end of the film. And again, they're just playing on the whole deaf guy can't hear what's going on gag, where Gene Wilder kind of picks up a knife and he threatens the helicopter pilot with, like, you better do what I say, otherwise there's going to be trouble kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll throw the knife at you. I won't even stab you. I'm all the way back here. I'll throw it at you.
Yeah, that's right. And the cops are all behind him repeating stuff and he doesn't realise it and he thinks that he is coercing the helicopter pilot.
He's such a badass that this helicopter pilot is doing what I say.
So he does it and it just works very, very well. And then he soon realises that the cops were there behind him and it didn't really do anything, but that's okay. Then you've got this great gag where the cops and Captain Braddock, and we meet Captain Braddock again, like right at the end of the film. Doesn't Pryor tell him he's a dickhead or something like that? Again, you're a fucking dickhead, you know?
Oh my god, that's like one of the funniest lines in the movie too, is that the Captain Braddock's just like right there and they're so happy and Adele's like, oh, thank you so much, Captain Braddock. Yeah, and then Pryor just comes out with it. Hey, Captain Braddock, you're a dickhead. And he just like wants to shoot them. He's like, oh,
can't I shoot them?
They're pulling him back.
So much time looking for them.
They didn't do it. We've got our villain. He can't shoot them. It's so good. I don't know. There's something about the timing of that and just like the unexpected that he would just call him a dickhead. Oh, so good.
The police arrive, the criminals are arrested, and Wally and Dave are released, having been cleared of the charges. And speaking of falsely accused, I mean, we've talked about this in the trivia in the previous, watches that we've done with Wilder and that, but you're not wrong. In the 3 films that we've watched so far, Wilder has been wrongly accused of some kind of crime and chased by police 3 times in a row.
I know. It's 3 out of 4, but it's funny. We'll talk about it next week. But the next film, he's not wrongfully accused of a crime, but he is implicated in the doing of a crime. So
nice.
Not quite the same thing, but very similar still. But yeah, we'll get to that. It does end with the two of them having a nice conversation, and it seems that Dave is kind of lightened up about the whole thing, and you think he's going to get one in on Wally and dump his ice cream cone on his head. But of course, Wally gets it in first and he's like, oh, well, I'll do it to you too. And fade to black with their ice creams on their head.
It's a funny gag. I like it. But it's just weird. The whole ice cream on their head, it's a weird gag. It's good though. I like it.
You're Dr. Johansson from Sweden.
Yes. Johansson from Sweden. Pussekindergarden. Holterbruder. I'm from Sweden.
Can I help you, gentlemen?
I'm from Sweden.
Oh, you must be Dr. Johansson.
Johansson from Sweden. I'm a Swede and you're a Swede.
Thank you. And you must be,
Yeah, I'm Dr. Kesselbaum.
You mean Kesselring?
Kesselring, right. I forget my own name next.
Yeah, you're one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. Here, there you are. Oh, you move so fast, like a little hummingbird, huh? Just poop-de-pop-de-pip. You're a little sneaker, aren't you? I bet you got wings like Mercury. You're such a nice little... Oh, there he is again. He's gonna rub it off, aren't you?
The little lunch you had left over there.
Oh, here you are.
Danke. Danke schön.
Dr. Kesselring, we thought you might not make it. Says, you had some trouble with your visa?
Yeah, and then suddenly they accepted American Express. Go figure.
We don't go home without it, I'll tell you that.
Oh, here, why don't you fill these out?
Thank you.
Here you go.
Yeah, here you are, Doctor. I got mine and you got yours.
Now, we're all out of double rooms, but I saved you a suite with 2 queens.
Well, get them fellas out of there. We want to get some sleep. Right, Doctor?
Here we go. Here's your key.
Thank you. Thank you. So, come, Doctor. We got to get some sleep now. Make some Z's.
I hope you don't snore. I have to send you back to Germany.
That's better than Philadelphia.
I'm willing to put money on the fact, Corey, that you're going to recommend this film.
Oh, yeah. I give this film a very high recommend. I think it's the funniest of the 4 movies we're going to talk about. Not to give too much away about next week's film, but this one, I think, was just the most cohesive film. It had a very clear story, went through. Wilder and Pryor together are the best they are together in this film. They just play off each other so well. And they did well last week, in last week's film, Stir Crazy, but the story was just, we talked about it up and down and all over the place. Not very cohesive at all. But this one had a very cohesive plot.
To be truthful, man, we probably made it sound more complicated than it actually was.
And of course, the whole thing with the coin and trying to get that was just the MacGuffin to get them in the situation. That really had, even the fact that it changed up at the end, that it's not even a rare gold coin, that it's some conductor thing. No consequence at all. There was, that was just the thing that was there. So we've got a definite blind guy caught up in all this madness. But it was so funny. Everything made sense. Like I said, the two of them together are at their peak in this film. So high recommend for me. I'm going to give this, how about 9 gold coins out of 10?
Yeah, I'm right with you, man. I think my rating is about 9 Wallies for me. I love this film. I think it's bordering on a comedy classic. I really enjoy this film. Like, Wilder and Pryor are great comedians. Their timing is spot on. They're unique as well. There's no one quite like them, which I really quite like. Even today, there's no one quite like them. I mean, you've got a lot of imitators that try to be like Pryor, but they don't quite catch the same kind of vibe that he kind of, especially in this film. Like, he is quite filthy and there's quite a lot of language and strong language, but you can tell that there's kind of acting and a lot of really solid comedian chops behind it as well. And in this film, these guys are just hitting their stride big time. I love this film. Again, I've watched this film half a dozen times over the last 20 years, and I'll probably watch it another half a dozen times in the next 20 years. It's a wonderful film. I highly recommend it. So definitely, you're probably right. Probably the best of the 4. Even saying that, I haven't seen Another You, so I reserve my judgment until next week. But yeah, I agree. This is the best of the bunch from my perspective.
Well said. Yeah. And like you just said, next week we are discussing Another You, and it's only a couple of years later, but they team back up in 1991 with Another You. So really looking forward to it.
Sadly, their last time they teamed up. So that's okay, though. We've had 4 pretty good, 3 so far. Let's see what the 4th is like. So anyway, that'll be next week.
Yeah.
So that's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast, or follow the show on Twitter at RewatchPod, and visit our webpage, rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And as always, you can write us an email or record a voice message and send it to therewatchpodcast@gmail.com. And also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. It's always very helpful. And you can help support the Rewatch Podcast by heading over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast and make a monthly contribution as little as $1. And of course, you can catch every last episode of the Rewatch Podcast because it's up on YouTube. So just search the Rewatch Podcast and subscribe today. So I guess it just leaves me to say, until next time, Fuzzy Wuzzy was a woman.
And we should hang out like this more often.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended.
Now listen to me. I know that this is a delicate situation, but let's talk a little sense.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com.
Yeah, get that ass moving there. Out of sight, out of macaroni. Get down, out of
Copyright 2017, The Rewatch Podcast.
I hope you had fun. Because I ain't gonna have no fun.
Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Cory.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Cory. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/rewatchpodcast.
Thanks, everyone.